Now United have to reset and they're thinking who's available. They want to be ambitious. And what I can tell you, as I've reported, is that like Mbeumo, if that progresses, and as with Cunha, a done deal, Viktor Gyokeres is open to a move to Manchester United, even without Champions League football.
Hello and welcome to Stretford Paddock. My name is Joe and today we are joined by a very special guest. Back on the channel is Ben Jacobs, senior football correspondent at Give Me Sport and transfer reporter, of course. Ben, how are you doing?
Very well. We were just sort of saying off air, it's a strange 10 days where the window's open, so it's busy, but it shuts on the 10th of June as well. So somehow I've got an opening and a closing of a window all in 10 days. And I've never been, nor has any reporter, in this kind of short space window before. And things are moving very fast, but it's always good fun. And even Manchester United, despite not being in the Club World Cup, are busy.
It's been very busy and a sort of startlingly competent start to the window. We'll get into the Bryan and Mbeumo stuff, of course, the latest on that. Obviously, Matheus Cunha has already signed. That deal has been announced by the club. But I want to get into something that you have tweeted about much more recently than obviously either of those two deals. And this is this Viktor Gyokeres update. And I'm going to read from my laptop here just to get your wording exactly right. You tweeted, Viktor Gyokeres is open to Manchester United, even without Champions League football. No approach to Sporting yet, and several other players and Saudi suitors. But Ruben Amorim is still in touch with the player. Sporting will sell for around 70 million euros. Give me this sort of your understanding of the potential of that deal, because obviously that keeps the door open from the Gyokeres side. How much interest is there from the Manchester United side as things stand?
Yeah, there's interest from the Manchester United side. Obviously, if they do it, they would want to put it onto the July period, because therefore all of the outlay becomes the next financial year. And now Manchester United are really crystallising what they're going to do about this number 9. Of course, that's separate to Bryan and Mbeumo, and Cunha's coming in. But how can they find this defined number 9 with or without Rasmus Højlund at the football club? And originally it was all about Liam Delap, and that was the number 1 target. Manchester United made a strong pitch. And in contrast to Cunha and Mbeumo, and now Gyokeres, if anything progresses, Delap wanted European football. Why? Because he feels that's the best chance of him forcing his way into Thomas Tuchel's 2026 England squad. So it was really important for Delap, European and ideally Champions League football. We'll never know. But had Manchester United beaten Spurs in the Europa League final, I think it would have been a really close call between whether Delap went to Manchester United or Chelsea. Chelsea have made a very strong pitch to Delap and succeeded. But that's not to say that Manchester United didn't also have some lure, or that Delap wasn't prepared to go back to the Northwest, which, away from the football aspect of the deal, was something definitely going through his mind. Now United have to reset. And they're thinking who's available. They want to be ambitious. And what I can tell you, as I've reported, is that like Mbeumo, if that progresses, and as with Cunha, a done deal, Viktor Gyokeres is open to a move to Manchester United, even without Champions League football. A part of this is obviously down to Ruben Amorim, who he knows very well. And another aspect is just a belief in the long-term ability of a football club like Manchester United to get back into the Champions League. So that's the exciting part. The less reported or aggregated aspect is the fact that United haven't made an approach to Sporting. They've not picked Gyokeres as their sole target or their new leading striker after seeing Delap sign for Chelsea. They're debating what's best. And that includes, for example, discussing internally a shorter-term deal for Alexander Mitrovic, who is eligible to leave Al Hilal, but wage there's a problem. And I don't think anything's going to happen between Manchester United and Mitrovic because of that, unless, for example, Al Hilal say they'll do a loan and they'll cover the wage, because ultimately Mitrovic is on excellent money in Saudi Arabia. So now we have to wait and see whether Manchester United turn this into anything. There's heavy competition, and that may force a resolution a little bit quicker. United would prefer to focus on Mbeumo now, and then in July think about their number 9. But we may see a domino effect, because Arsenal are going to pick between Gyokeres or Sesko. So already there's another Premier League club in the mix. He's on Chelsea's list as well. You've got 2 clubs in Saudi Arabia, Al Ittihad and Al Qadsiya. But my understanding is the player doesn't want to go to Saudi Arabia now. And then a bit of a dark horse could be PSG as well. Because if Victor Osimhen goes to Saudi Arabia, PSG are looking for a number 9. The expectation is that Randal Kolo Muani leaves. He spent last season on loan with Juventus. Marco Asensio, who was at Villa, also expected to depart. So there's room for PSG to add one more. And Viktor Gyokeres is a player that Luis Campos in particular really likes. So I know when these things come out, you get a lot of buzz and excitement, and you get a lot of short parts of the story aggregated, and people are taking away Gyökeres open to Manchester United without Champions League football, which is accurate to my understanding. But there's still a lot of steps to turn that into, one, a formal approach to Sporting, and two, other suitors potentially at play. And then regarding the finances of it, the wage is high, so are the agent fees. But 70 million euros is seen as market value because Gyökeres is on fire. He scored over 50 goals last season, and the release clause is 100 million euros. And the reason why he's still a Sporting player now is because pretty much in the last 4 windows, Sporting have said very clearly it's release clause or nothing. Now there's a gentleman's pact in place based upon the fact that Gyökeres decided not to agitate for a move, to do the full season with Sporting, and thereafter be allowed to leave this summer for a lower number. And that's why there's a market opportunity now. There's going to be a mad race for Gyökeres. And the point here is if Manchester United choose to formally enter it, they will not feel that a lack of Champions League football will put them at a disadvantage.
I mean, it's really interesting, and that's why I think, like you said about the whole story being reported, that's why I like having these sort of longer form conversations where it's not just a tweet or a snippet and you can get that full news, because I do think it is important that he was willing to join Man United. That's a big first step, but like you said, there are other pieces and other sort of dominoes around Europe that kind of have to fall United's way for this to make sense for us. Just in terms of the way these deals are being done, because, like we said before, Cunha has been announced, that's done. And Mbeumo, he wants to join Manchester United, and United are now in that kind of working out a fee process with Brentford. It feels as though there's very promising signs around that deal as well. We're only on the 5th of June. You know, this is very quick for Manchester United. This feels very competent and very sort of assured in a way that we haven't seen it in a large number of years. We also heard the news last night as well that Jason Wilcox has now been kind of promoted or retitled to Director of Football. You've got Christopher Vivell in there, who I think became a permanent member of staff around February as part of that negotiations team. Who is sort of calling the shots, and who is the one that's behind this change in tact, this kind of competence that we're seemingly seeing from Manchester United?
Yeah, I think the change in tact is partly born out of urgency in the season that Manchester United have come from, and we shouldn't get overexcited in the sense that they're doing a lot, which is what you'd expect, and they're having to move early because there's competition for some of the players they're looking for, and that's where the so-called Club World Cup window has made everybody do a bit of business early. So if you want to enter the race for Mbeumo, other clubs are thinking, okay, maybe we're prepared to do it in June. If you want to sign Gyökeres, regardless of when it happens, you've got to do the legwork. So the domino effect of the window opening earlier is making clubs more decisive. And we're seeing that with Liverpool, even though they're not in the Club World Cup. We're seeing that with Manchester City. They're likely to get Ryan Aït-Nouri over the line in time for the Club World Cup. In addition to that, they're negotiating for Turkey. And so many clubs seem to be after the same kind of profile. A lot want a number 9, a lot want a number 10, many want a left winger, a fair few want a central defender. And as a consequence, I think everybody is aware if you do it only on your own timeline and think there's plenty of time this summer, you're going to lose out on targets because this is a very unusual summer. Then naturally, you have a reshaping under Jim Ratcliffe. And in this window, we're seeing some of the kind of Ineos strategic thinkers step back. And the excellent Matt Lawton broke Sir Dave Brailsford is going to be doing no day-to-day at Manchester United and instead turning his attention to Ineos. We've already seen Jean-Claude Blanc step back as a director. So now you've got a defined football department with Jason Wilcox calling the shots. Dan Ashworth left. Wilcox filled the gap, highly respected. They think he's done a good job, has an excellent relationship with everyone at Carrington, is present, visible, accountable. That's important. There's a lot more face-to-face conversations going on now between, for example, Wilcox and Amorim that maybe didn't always happen in the past when the recruitment team were more travelling bands rather than fixed within Carrington. And I think the broader point here is this is why Jim Ratcliffe wanted all the senior employees to come back to Manchester and make a hub so things could actually be done quicker and more effectively. So it's leaner and meaner. So Jason Wilcox has been promoted to Director of Football. Working under him is Christopher Vivell, Director of Recruitment. Another example of a name that is highly regarded and has come from a background that's seen him always have an eye for talent and youth, excellent contact book, strong in emerging markets, and a decent negotiator as well when needed. So Wilcox and Vivell will make a nice little double act. And Vivell will report to Wilcox. Wilcox will ultimately report to the CEO, Omar Barada. Then Barada's sitting on that intersect between football and brand and is the most important day-to-day person at the club. And he feeds back to Sir Jim Ratcliffe and any other Ineos people, but will also be involved on the football side because as at Manchester City, he's very invested in a transfer negotiation. He's very creative from what I'm told financially, and he'll find a way to make some of these deals work even within a tight PSR position. And then the other department, maybe not as exciting to every football fan, but you have Mark Armstrong, who's leading the club's commercial arm as their chief business officer. And that's all about modernisation. It's about brand building. It's about shirt sponsorship and so on. So now we have a very clear idea of who's doing what, all feeding back up to Ineos people and ultimately still the Glazers as well. And in terms of why do they appear to be more decisive, I think that is probably just a perception, because if they don't get Brian and Mbeumo, if they don't end up bidding for Viktor Gyokeres, people are going to turn around and go, it was only Cunha, and that was simple because there was a 62.5 million release clause. So there is an excitement naturally because the calibre of players that Manchester United are going for, and not just thinking about discussing, genuinely placing bids for and holding talks with. And that I think is because Jason Wilcox and Christopher Vivell and largely Jim Ratcliffe as well, they realise that this is kind of day one for Ruben Amorim, which might sound like a ridiculous thing to say, but you have to come back to that really crucial point. Ruben Amorim said when he was offered this job, I do not want it mid-season. I only want to come 1st of June 2025. Now we've just passed the 1st of June 2025. And I'm not saying that anyone at the football club that I speak to would make excuses for last season. And Amorim is ultimately still culpable for aspects of the failure, even though he inherited a project that was built for Ten Hag over that crazy summer where they U-turned on the manager's position, they U-turned on Dan Ashworth's position, a lot of turmoil, a lot of changes, a lot of new voices. But I think everyone at Manchester United now just wants to look forwards. And Ruben Amorim's perspective is, okay, we have to acknowledge, as he did publicly, the failure of last season. But these are the first days when Amorim actually wanted to start. And he didn't want to be attached to last season. But he was told, you either take it, otherwise we'll hire someone else. And it was too good an opportunity to turn down. And I think this push to say, let's make some statement signings, even with a tight PSR position, is down to the fact that Manchester United want to give Ruben Amorim the best possible platform to have the most stable pre-season and get these players actually thriving and understanding his system. So then from there, with a bit of quality and a lot of time spent on actually adapting, hopefully Manchester United can hit the ground running. And that's why I think they're trying to do everything as quick as they can. But let me just make one more point, which is another important thing that seems to be slipping under the radar. Trying to do something quickly and getting it done quickly are two different things. Bidding for Mbeumo and getting Mbeumo, two different things. Doing Cunha and classifying Cunha as a Manchester United player contractually are two different things. So on that last point, they've done Cunha's deal, but he hasn't got his visa. And when the visa comes, the contract will be the 1st of July. So you're going to see this paradox of fastly trying to line up options and get clarity and not waste their time on transfers, not get embroiled into long-running sagas. But then if they think the deals are there to be done, you might see the brakes put on a little bit because they want the business actually contractually and for book purposes done in July. And the 1st of July for Cunha means you don't pay him a June wage. It means your first instalment of 20.8 million is July the 1st, and therefore is on the next financial year, not this one. And by the time we get to the end of the next financial year, who even knows if PSR in its current form will still exist? So they're trying to be slow and methodical and creative financially, and they're trying to be lean and mean in the market, get clear targets, move fast and decisively for them, and then if they think they're not going to get them, walk away. So if they come back and bid again for Mbeumo and Brentford turn around and insist on what Manchester United consider to be too high a number, instead of making it will they, won't they, will they, won't they, and as with Rasmus Højlund, finally paying 30-40 million above what they intended, I think you're just going to see them walk away. So keep an eye on business getting done quickly, but don't be surprised if Manchester United affirm it in the market as well. They bid, everyone gets excited, but if there's no value to be had, I think Jim Ratcliffe and his team will be advising them to walk away from deals a lot quicker than they have done in the past.
It's quite a balancing act that they've got to work around here, isn't it? They, like you said, they need to be certain, they need to get things done early to, help United, but also push away other bidders and other options. But like you said, we can't carry on this narrative that United gets screwed over in the transfer market because we'll pay whatever it takes. It's a really tough summer, and obviously they've got to overcome how bad it was last season. On Bryan Mbeumo then, obviously we've mentioned him. It's understood that there's been a 45 plus £10 million bid. You tweeted earlier that Brentford want at least 50 million up front, as far as your understanding is, and that they were pointing to the 62.5 million that United paid for Cunha, and think that he is worth a similar or the same amount. Is that still your understanding? And where are things currently with that deal?
Yeah, Manchester United expected to make a second bid. Obviously, it could come at any point, but at the time we're live, it hasn't been. First one's been turned down below Brentford's valuation. And valuation in this deal, if it comes off, will not just be a number. It will be about the structure and how easy the add-ons are to get. And I'm told that Brentford prefer, if there's add-ons, for them to be framed around Mbeumo because they know the player and back him to hit certain goals, such as actual goals or appearances, whereas Manchester United are more inclined maybe to go higher with the add-on side to get to a bigger total number, but have those add-ons triggered by things like winning a trophy or qualifying potentially for the Champions League. And from Brentford's point of view, they're probably thinking, if we sell this player, he's going to play every week. If we put add-ons based on appearances, we're going to get them very quickly. If we put add-ons based on winning the Champions League, maybe they can get back in there and do it, but it might take a bit more time and it's not as guaranteed. So structure of the deal is going to be really important. I think people are always focused on transfers on a number, but it's actually the structure that's key. Even if Manchester United went, here's 50 million up front, 50 million in add-ons. If the add-ons were triggered, if Mbeumo wins 5 consecutive Ballon d'Ors, then it's basically saying, with respect to Mbeumo, maybe he'll surprise me, that's 50 million plus 0, even though it appears like you've offered 100 million. And similarly, if you're saying have £1 for every minute that Mbeumo plays, not that I've ever seen an add-on structured like this, but I'm just trying to pick 2 slightly crazy extreme examples, then Brentford are thinking, brilliant, every time he completes 90 minutes, we're getting money. And then maybe the total valuation is lower, but you're actually thinking we're going to get the add-ons. Yeah. So structure is going to be very important. But my understanding is the offer, as I think it was revealed first by David Ornstein, £45 million, 10 million in add-ons. And Brentford want, and I stress these 2 words, at least 50 million guaranteed, which is something that I was reporting even before the offer was placed. Then add-ons on top, pointing towards that ballpark of a Cunha valuation. And I think if Manchester United got a package to over 60, including add-ons, and 50 or over, including guaranteed fee, they'll stand a very realistic chance of it getting done. They've got a bit of leverage because Mbeumo's already said to Brentford he wants to move to Manchester United. That will help. But just because he has made his preference clear, it doesn't mean there aren't other suitors. For example, Newcastle have been pushing relatively hard. Arsenal have made inquiries in the past as well. Players don't always get their preference. I don't know whether you remember the Mykhailo Mudryk saga. He was saying publicly, quote, in an interview I did with him, I cannot say no to Arsenal. And then Arsenal bid about 95 million euros. Chelsea matched the 100 million. Mudryk decided to go to Chelsea. So Mbeumo may prefer United, but that's not to say there won't be other appealing suitors if United and Brentford can't come to an agreement. But Manchester United at the moment feel calm because they're the only ones that have formally bid. They're the ones that have a player who wishes to join them. But how many times do we see transfers where a player wants one club and still has to settle for another? So now we have to wait and see how high are Manchester United prepared to go, because Brentford feel that they can be a bit bullish this early in the window anyway in their negotiation, because although Mbeumo's only got 1 year left on his contract, there's a club option to trigger by a further 12 months. So they can effectively protect the value and point to a higher number because he's got 1 year on paper, but all the club have to do is trigger the extra year and suddenly he's got 2 years. And then you're saying, okay, this is why we want a little bit more. So do I think the deal's going to get done? Obviously, people are asking me that. I'm not in the room.
I haven't even had to ask you, but I was going to ask you that, yeah.
So my read at the moment is, as I've reported, that a second bid will be placed. And then I come back to the previous answer about, are Manchester United changing themselves now to be more decisive and to be more disciplined in the market? And if they place the second bid that's closer to that Cunha number, and it's still turned down and there's still a gulf in valuation, then old Manchester United might well just add another 5 or 10 million, and then people might construe they've overpaid. New Manchester United could walk away at that point. And that will be the most interesting thing to see, because right now the new approach is being praised of trying to do business quickly, being very ambitious, signing proven Premier League talent. But part of this approach, again, is making sure they don't waste their time and they don't get players in, even if they want them, with the so-called Manchester United tax. And that's where, if it does get to the point where they can't get closer to Brentford's valuation, they'll have a big decision to make as to whether to keep bidding. And that's taking money away potentially from what they'll want to put towards a number 9, or alternatively, they decide to do something a bit different from Manchester United in recent windows and walk away. Last summer, when Ineos were involved, they just kept going and going and going for players. Dorgu was a good example, and finally they got a breakthrough. Let's see how Wilcox and Vivell decide to handle the situation. But I do think there's a realistic chance Mbeumo will happen, because you've already put 55 million on the table. It's certainly not a derisory offer. You've got a player that wants the move. You've got Brentford that are appreciative of Mbeumo, and they know he wants a new challenge. So let's see what the second bid brings, and then the picture should be clearer.
Yeah, it's a good point you made there, because if United are going to be firmer and more grown up in the transfer market, there will be a time where we have to walk away from a deal that all of us as fans and the club want to make, because you can't just be all talk, can you? At some point you have to put your sort of money where your mouth is and go, actually, this has gone a step too far. We're going to make that break. Hopefully it doesn't happen with Mbeumo and we can get that deal done. I know you're short for time, so just a last quick question. Viktor Gyokeres is obviously a name on a list. We seem to have a few names on lists. Mitrovic was one that you mentioned, but that isn't looking likely. I saw Moise Kean has been linked with Manchester United. Are there any other names in that number 9 position? Because it seems like there's 2 brackets. There's the sort of Osimhen, Gyokeres, 60, 70 million, big wages kind of striker. Then there's that sort of Delap, Mitrovic, Moise Kean, type that United have been linked with, maybe in that 20 to 30 million bracket. Are there any other names that you think we should be looking out for as United fans?
Well, I think with Manchester United, they'll be opportunistic in the market to number 9s that are available, hence the consideration for specifically Mitrovic, because it's obvious if Osimhen joins Al Hilal, then they'll have to lose somebody. And that's not because they don't like Mitrovic. It's just the fact that you have foreign quotas and Saudi teams. So if 3 players are going to arrive for the Club World Cup, all foreigners for Al Hilal, they'll be fine for a little bit, because that foreign quota doesn't apply to the Club World Cup. But as soon as they start their season, they'll have too many. And we might see others in this kind of bracket where later in the window, as we get a merry-go-round of movement, Manchester United realise a forward is available. People keep asking me about Harry Kane. I'm not sure why. He's not going to be leaving this summer, probably just because Manchester United were interested in him before he moved to Bayern. But a bit like Florian Wirtz with Bayern and Liverpool, Leverkusen had two prices and Daniel Levy had one price for Man United. When they heard it, they actually did just walk straight away without bidding. And then for Bayern, a totally different number because Levy didn't want to sell to a rival suitor. And I think with a lot of the names that have maybe been discussed internally at Manchester United within the Premier League, it's a similar story. Ollie Watkins has a question mark over his future, even though Villa don't want to sell. I'm not aware of any specific Manchester United links. Mateta is one I get asked about a lot because some Manchester United fans feel he'd be a good kind of profile for the club. But Palace have got European football and Villa want to try and hang on to their stars, but in a tight PSR position. And if they're going to sell and are presented with an opportunity from abroad, and sometimes in the case of Villa's players, Saudi Arabia versus a rival, it's going to be quite hard for that Premier League rival to get those players at value. And this is why I don't think we've seen Manchester United move yet for any of the real performers within the Premier League that you might think, like them or loathe them, short term or long term. If you had Watkins in a Man United team or Mateta in a Man United team, simply put, would they score more goals than what you've got in either Xerxes or Højlund? And my personal view would be yes.
I agree.
But Manchester United are looking for value and they're looking, where possible, for something long term. There will be exceptions, hence Mitrovic, because there's just a window of opportunity there. But when they're thinking about this number 9, it's very much about not a certain number. So it isn't a case of once we get into the second half of the financial year, they'll dismiss a particular player because of the fee, but it's about value. And you get value because either they're not on an astronomical wage over a long period of time, and then if they don't work, you're stuck with that wage. Look at Anthony, look at Jadon Sancho, look at Marcus Rashford, huge wages. And if you can't find a solution, you have to loan them. And the longer it takes you to find a solution, the more you're paying them. And even if you just add up those 3 players, it's probably around $1 million in terms of their collective wages a week. So over 4 million a month. Times that by 12 months if they end up staying at the club. And you're thinking, yikes, whereas you may be able to get rid of them and find a player that's prepared to fit into your wage structure. It doesn't matter what that number is, as long as they fit into the wage structure, i.e. incentive-driven, prepared to take the 20% reduction in seasons without Champions League football. So constantly I get asked, what can Manchester United spend because of PSR? And the reply is really contingent on outgoings, contingent on being creative financially. So with Mbeumo as well, the structure of that deal will be really important because if they can get preferable payment terms, it's a lot easier for them to do and maybe go higher. If they can't and they have to spread the cost along a smaller period of time, it may impact their PSR position more significantly. And these are all the complicated and boring considerations, whereas fans obviously think if there's only a 5 million golf in valuation, why are they not going up and just getting the deal done? So that's the mantra I'm told at the football club this summer for Manchester United. It's not about we will or won't pay a certain number. It's about we want value for money. Did they get value for money with the Højlund fee? No. Did they get value for money with the Anthony fee? No. Are they going to get value for money with outgoings? Can they get their 60 million for Garnacho? Can they get their 40 million for Marcus Rashford? Can they find a solution that gives them some of the Anthony fee back? And if they can't, particularly with Højlund, you're making a book loss. And again, that's not valuable because if he departs and you bring in a figure, it is logical to say you'll put that towards a number 9. But if you've made a book loss, it's still damning as far as your PSR position is concerned. So that's what they're looking for in the market. And right now, I think if they wanted to enter the race for some of those Premier League names that I've mentioned, and I'm not aware of any links between Manchester United and Watkins, for example, at this point, but I just used him as an example because it's an interesting case. If they want to enter that kind of race or they want to try for a Mateta, the problem is the selling club especially to a rival, has got all of the cards. And that's why I think Manchester United were really keen on Delap, because there was no game. It was a simple stated release clause with set terms, 20 million up front, 10 million after that, and then Ipswich getting a sell-on. With Cunha, exactly the same. It wasn't going to Wolves and being told, we want 100 million, or if you give us 62.5 million, it's got to be in one go. It was a clear on paper, 3 instalments, 62.5 million. With some of these other names, that clarity doesn't exist. And it may mean that Manchester United feel if they engage with a Premier League club to try and do business, they might get stung with a too high valuation. And this Mbeumo case will be a good test to see whether that happens and how they navigate it.
Well, we'll be watching closely, of course. We'll be keeping track of all Man United transfers, as I'm sure you will be and have been so far in this window. So thank you very much, Ben, for coming on and giving us your time. It's been a pleasure having you back on the channel, as always.
Always a pleasure. Keep up the good work, and let's hope Manchester United can have a busy summer.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you very much, Ben. Make sure you go and check Ben out. I'll put links to his Twitter and some of his articles in the description as well, so go and check him out. Once again, Ben Jacobs, thank you very much for coming on. This has been an interview. We'll see you in a bit.